Hello everyone and welcome to the program Discuss here on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi. Many thanks for joining on today's edition of the program as we look to have a conversation that is topical and at the forefront in the political space and economic space at the same time. We'll be having two conversations today. Firstly, we'll be looking at Onitsha main market as traders in Onitsha main market, Anambra State reopened their shop yesterday in compliance with the directive of Governor Chukwuma Soludo. For some years now, traders across the southeast region have stayed off their business place in solidarity with the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. But in a move to tackle this trend, Soludo had last Monday ordered that the market be shut down for 1 week. The governor also warned that if traders fail to open at the end of 1 week shut down, the market would be closed for another week and subsequently for longer periods. However, a week after economic activities were grounded, the traders were seen trooping into the market. That was yesterday. During a visit to the market, it was observed that many traders resumed their businesses as early as 8:45 a.m. and saying that now a lot of individuals have reacted differently to this significant fact. Some were like, okay, the entire Southeast suffered economically because millions and billions of naira were lost because of the lack of business activities that were not able to be conducted during the previous week. And some individuals have reacted differently to say, was this the right move to be made? But in the long run, some have argued that the governor did what is best for the state in the sense that he took that drastic decision, yes, to halt the economy in the state for 1 week, and looking further to do that will also hamper and also damage the incomings, like the resources and monies that come into the state's GDP. On that other note, some individuals have reacted that the shutting down of the market has no effect and has nothing entirely to do with the federal government, because this part of the country now is not an oil producing state where we will say yes, due to the fact of the sit at home and lockdown for a week, a lot of international businesses will not be conducted, but still individuals from every part of the country gets to go to this Onitsha market to buy goods that they sell in different parts of the country. So it has its own negative impact, and then we'll be looking at how this activity has been able to, hamper the economic growth for a week, and also what we'll be looking further if we'll be seeing actions like this taken by Governor Soludo if he gives an order and the people of his state don't get to respond. Now, all of this, remember, all of this has been going on for years now, and this is a time where Governor Soludo is stepping in and putting his foot on the ground to say, no, this has to come to an end. We saw some things like this again happening in other parts of the eastern part of Nigeria. We saw Governor from Enugu State, assuming office, had to debunk and then washed his hands off it and say nothing like that will be happening in his state. I think now Anambra State, where is the center of the state at home, a lot of we are seeing the governor now who is trying to make a bold statement and putting his foot down and saying those activities cannot be condoned in his state. So this happened last week, and then we saw that individuals came into market yesterday, but some part of the state still, according to reports, we still observed the sit-at-home policy that has been on for a reasonable amount of years. So to join me unpack and have this conversation, it's a very good friend, a big friend, and a senior colleague of mine, the person of Uyi Agbom-Mofwegbe. Good afternoon, Uyi. Thank you for joining us.
So good to be here, Sam.
Yes, so it's no longer news. We've been seeing all of this sit-at-home incidents that has been happening over the years, and it hampers economy, obviously. Maybe some persons might agree and some will also disagree. But looking at it from your standpoint now, the bold step, the fact that the governor put his foot on the ground this time and said, okay, if you're not coming to do your business, I'm locking down. Do you think that's the best approach to solve the problem?
Well, there are those who have said that was more like a desperate move by the governor. Mm-hmm. But we can't have this conversation if we do not basically appreciate the trajectory that has led to where these states are today, especially Anambra, for example. Anambra is a hub in Nigeria as far as business is concerned. And the average Anambra might said to be not just industrious, but it's said to be very enterprising, right? So if you now have these seats at home brought about by a group that has now been, on account of a very valid court order, proscribed, that's the indigenous people of Biafra, then you're wondering, what exactly is the goal? At a point, Sam, you'll agree that IPOB had almost become like a parallel government across the 5 states. Questions were asked as to what are the governors doing individually and collectively to ensure that this doesn't become the case. I mean, like I was telling Juma on the program earlier today, you find that somebody travels from Abuja to the east. They're supposed to return, let's say, on Monday. They move their trip to Tuesday or even Wednesday because they say there's a lockdown, they sit at home, they can't find their way back to Abuja on a Monday. And that's even on an individual level. It becomes an embarrassment as well for the government of the day, because if you're in Enugu, Ebonyi, Abia, Imo, or Anambra, it's almost like you're trapped. If you are within those states, you can't leave. If you are outside, you can't come in.
And if it's a Monday, through that state,
right? It's a problem, exactly. So it was quite a tough, if you like, a decision. I mean, a situation. But some governors came up, like you mentioned, Governor Peter Mbah of Enugu State, to say, look, we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different outcome. We must not ask ourselves, how do we want to live as Southeasterners? You know, because this is incidentally the only region where you have these so-called sit at home. And to even think that it's not an order of government, I mean, a government that is democratically elected, it's an order by a group that has been proscribed. And each governor came up and said, this is what we would do as a state government, and this is what we can do as a collective, which means as a region, all the 5 states. So for Governor Soludo, the idea is to say that, look, we are putting our foot down and there's no going back. In fact, if you followed, he even said at the point that if the traders refuse to open shops, yes, he could convert the entire market to a school. And I was discussing this with my wife, by the way, and she said, well, whether it remains a market or you convert it to a school, the question is, will it serve the overall interest of the people? But again, you and I know how very pivotal and economically strategic this Onitsha main market has been. I mean, I grew up to know there's a place called Onitsha main market. As a young boy, before primary school, I already knew people who were coming from Edo or Bendel, as it then was, to this market and from across the country. So it was going to be a dilemma whether you were going to shut it down or allow these so-called things at home to continue. But let's also look at the perspective of the traders themselves. They are saying it's not as if we are being recalcitrant, not complying with the order of the state governments. But these people have had several occasions on which they have attacked traders because they thought that their own orders were being flouted. So again, it was between the rock and the hard place for the traders.
All right, now that means now for these individuals to go back to the market, because in some parts of the state, some individuals didn't open their shops, their businesses were still shut down. Now, do you think the governor is just taking this decisive step, or he needs to have a couple of things in place? Like you rightly mentioned, this said proscribed individuals, allegedly, attacked these marketers for defaulting their orders. Don't you think that the governor is not doing enough in terms of providing security for these people to have the confidence of comfortably going to open their shop and run their businesses, instead of taking a bolder step, I would say audacious step, to say, okay, I'll turn the entire place into a school, which that market holds a historic activities which will also spike another different chaos in the state if he does take that move. So what do you think the governor should do now if he wants this sit-at-home policy to be abolished totally from his state, which is the headquarter of the entire sit-at-home situation? Do you think he should seek the help of the president to provide more security so as the citizens will be able to go to the market, run their daily affairs without having, any record of fear?
Sam, if you have followed the last, 5 years in particular, with regards to the sit-at-home phenomenon in the East, you realize that for all the wrong reasons, Anambra had become more like the epicenter, like the flashpoint. I mean, like I also mentioned when Juma and I were together hosting a Global Morning today, how that's where the husband of late Professor Dora Konyele was murdered. And we saw several other murders, prominent and not so prominent, so to speak, individuals in that state. So beyond the economics of it, there's the embarrassment of it. But then let's ask ourselves, can can a state government, in this case in particular, Anambra State government, under the leadership of Professor Charles Chukwuma Soludo, be able to bring this to an end? I'm afraid it cannot. And like you highlighted, there's probably the need for the state government to find some sort of handshake with the federal government. All right, so it has to be that strategic. It has to be that formidable, and it has to be that innovative. So it's not just about the governor coming and paying on announced visits to the markets. All right, beyond that, what happens? The governor won't be coming there every day. In any case, the governor is first a human being before anything else. So the question is, has the governor been able to establish some sort of partnership with the state, federal government in this regard? That's number one. Number two is, can one state government bring it to an end? Because these guys have spread across the region. So if you're able to succeed with a big if, by the way, in one state, they move to another state, just like you have terror cells as well. So they continue to morph and move and exactly just, shift base, as it were. So that's a challenge. Therefore, I would say, why don't all 5 governors from Mumbai to Anambra exactly find some common grounds? We've seen them do that before.
With the IPOP individuals first or before seeking?
I'm not even thinking, I'm not a security expert, but off the top of my head, I'm not thinking it should be a dialogue with the IPOB people. I think it should be with the security agencies first, right? And say, look, what can we do to deal with this existential threat? Because that's what it is. We had seen at the point where even some Easterners were said to be saying, look, soldiers have been dispersed across our region, you have to recall them and all of that. But we need more than the presence of soldiers, the presence of the military. It has to be something more strategic in such a way that people are able to go to their farms without fear. People are able to go open their shops without fear. People are able to go do their legitimate businesses without fear. So I'm not sure one state government, whether Anambra or any other one for that matter, can pull that off. And that's why I like the part where, you played us a clip a while ago, where we saw the governor interacting with the people. And somebody was also raising that, that's a 37-second video. But if you watch the full length, you see somebody was asking, what happens given that we all know our lives are at risk? We don't have a problem coming to open our shops. But somebody can die in between. Somebody can be killed while they are in their shops. Because the IPOB people believe that if you open your shop, you are flouting their own order. So who is there to protect the everyday Anambra man or the, in general, Indian Anambra in this case? So the governor must provide a very comprehensive answer to that question. Otherwise, we'll just be putting the cart before the horse. And if you do that, you're only going to make a bad situation worse.
Okay, let's look at it in another different light economically now, because we've seen that the president is ambitious to build Nigerian GDP to ₦1 trillion by 2030. So now, looking at that, now, if this other part, like you mentioned, now we need 5 state governors to be able to come to a consensus on what exactly to do to tackle the issue, because it's all over the East. To be very sure, let's say Ebonyi, Imo, Anambra, Abia, and Enugu states, these individuals are we've seen reports and videos on social media of them taking out their activities and all. So now, the first steps you mentioned is for the 5 governors to come and have an agreement, because a divided house obviously cannot hold something. Now, how do you think this would hamper the GDP growth, the ambitious GDP growth of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if this region don't get to contribute their own quota to the federal?
We don't need to talk about how it will affect it. We should probably be doing an assessment of how it has already been affecting it, right? And so by some estimates, sometime in 2024, we're told that the region was losing at least 5 billion every day on account of sit at home. So you think about that for a second.
That's just on every day?
Every day, yes, of not opening those shops every Monday. All right, and you have 52 Mondays in a year. So if you do 52 times 5 years, right, you're already looking at about 260. Yes, you're looking at 260 weeks or 260 Mondays times 5 billion. You know what that comes to. Now, the president's Tinubu-led administration says by 2030, its objective is to hit a $1 trillion economy. That is not just going to happen as a stand-alone objective. It will be, it's ground up kind of thing. All right. So if you are going to achieve that laudable objective from the ground up, a region as critical as the Southeast cannot be ignored. It will be too naive. There will be too much of a price to pay if you ignore a region like that. So for you to not ignore such a region, you must find the courage, you must also find the creativity and innovation to deal with IPOB and all of these sit-at-home issues. Now, Enugu State's government has never been more ambitious, given what we have seen with Governor Peter Umba now.
Yes.
But the question is, can the Peter Umba-led administration achieve its objectives with sit-at-home order in place? Of course, it cannot. I think we now need to see a way we can track, or if you like, be able to tackle insecurity the same way we do with election. When we have off-cycle election, you hear that police have deployed 35,000, 40,000, 60,000 policemen for one election in a single state. Why don't we say we're declaring state of emergency in the Southeast? We did state of emergency in River State. It was one state, it was a political tussle. And yet we saw basis, we saw grounds for the declaration of state of emergency. Can we not replicate same in a region, 5 states, where we understand that so much of economic output comes from? And say, look, we won't go to bed until we see the end of this. And in any case, does it mean our intel has not been able to pick those behind IPOB?
IPOB, yes.
Because I think we are giving too many excuses. As Tony Elomelo will say, we are talking too much already, right? Can't we? I mean, our intel can't pick those behind Boko Haram. We can't pick those behind illegal mining, those behind banditry, those behind kidnapping. We also cannot pick or track those behind IPOB. So you can't end it at home in the Southeast. That's the point I'm making. If you do not tackle IPOB, it is one thing for you to have prescribed the group, and that's a court order. The court is not going to enforce that for you. It is now left for the executive to use its own paraphernalia, which of course we understand is the security agencies, to ensure it ends it at home once and for all. And people have also said that because politicians are complicit in it, it has become a tall order.
But do you think it's totally politically inclined, the IPOB and sit-at-home that we witness in the Southeast?
You know, we keep hearing that it's the agitation to say, look, we want to go as
you think something else, some fractions have gotten into it. It's now politically.
It is now, yes, there's now politics involved in it, because if you look at the body language of some of the governors, you're asking, I mean, especially governors before the 2023 governors, you're asking yourself, were they sincere in their conversations, in their narratives around tackling IPOB, or were they talking or speaking from both sides of the mouth? Because you can't have an action going one direction and you have your rhetoric going in a different direction. We must have, I mean, both must be in sync. Otherwise, what you're doing is the governor is just waiting to do his 4 years or 8 years, as the case may be, and then he leaves the states, and how you guys deal with this is your problem.
You know, there's something else you mentioned about, River State. You cited that as an example, having a little political tussle between the former governor, who is the current FCT minister, and his successor, Governor Siminalayi Fubara, which we'll still have a conversation, hopefully, about those individuals a little bit later in the show. But looking at it now, do you think it's because of the fact that the River State is more of an oil-producing state? Do you think that's the reason why the president moved swiftly to introduce a sole administrator for the period of 6 months to stabilize things? Do you think the same thing can be applicable in Anambra State, to be specific? Because Anambra State is like the headquarters of all of these happenings, and then it transits to other neighboring states. Do you think if the same thing happens in Anambra State, there will be a level of stability if the president was stepping in that direction?
So we're asking, why did the president step in so quickly?
Why,
in fact, whether quickly or otherwise, why did he step in at all? In the case of Rivers, 2 factors. There's oil, there's political interest, all right? A former governor of my state once said that there is no such thing, as far as governors are concerned, he said, there is no such thing as an abandoned project. He said a governor would be said to have abandoned the project if the governor is not interested. If the governor has interest in that project, he says, it can never be abandoned. And he proved it by spending about 3 to 4 years to set up a university, start to finish. All right, so what it means is, once the will is there, the way will open. So if we want to end it at home in the Southeast, the point is, it will end. So the question would be, do the governors, as today constituted, willing to end it? Are the political players, the gladiators in the Southeast, ready to end it? Are the security agencies committed to ending it? If we have yes, I mean, if we tick all of those boxes, it can end in as few as 72 hours.
You know, there's something late General Sani Abacha says, that whatever insurgency that lasts more than 24 hours,
you know, there's a chance government is involved in it.
There's a chance the government is involved in it. Do you think that's what's playing out in not just in Anambra State, even in some other parts of the country where we're seeing high level of insurgency and all of that still playing out. Well, leaving that to aside, because that's another conversation entirely. How swift do you think it can be for, or what practical steps do you think, or initiative do you think the stakeholders, political stakeholders within these 5 eastern states, and with the help of the president, what initiative do you think can be put in place to see to the gradual easing of sit at home? Because maybe if it's being applied forcefully, it might escalate to what, loss of life and properties for the state and the citizens of the people of the state. So what do you think can be done by these political gladiators within these states that would help ease out this? Do you think releasing of Nnamdi Kanu, giving him a presidential pardon from jail would be a step towards that direction?
It's a bit sensitive of the matter of an issue to discuss. As we speak now, Nnamdi Kanu is in a correctional center in Sokoto State. A few years before now, we have heard people, especially those of the southeastern extraction, so that look, enough with the litigation, let's forget about all these legal procedures and what have you. That the only way to end this and bring absolute closure is to find political solution. And then you're asking yourself, what could that political solution be? There are those who say that the leaders in the southeast must put pressure on the president. They started out with the former president, and now late, talking about Muhammadu Buhari. Of course, the Buhari administration came and it's gone. Now we're looking at another administration, that of Bola Tinubu, doing its 3rd year already. That doesn't appear to have been the case apparently. We're seeing the top hierarchy of Waneze Dingbo go to pay a visit to President Tinubu.
In line with this?
Yes, we're seeing governors visit him. We have seen governors who even said, look, we will reach out to the president, we will plead with him, he's the father of the nation, let him temper justice with mercy and things like that. At least we have heard that much from no less a person than the governor of Abia State, Alex Otti. All right, yes. That of Alex Otti, some people say, well, we can't rush him, we need to give him some time. He's not been in office for that long. Besides, he's not a governor in the mainstream party, which is the ruling APC and things like that. But I don't even think this is so much about Nnamdi Kanu. And again, let's be clear. Government also has its own ego, so to speak. Government has its own minimum standards in such a way that you can't bully the government. That's the point. You can't bully the government with violence just so you can have the government bend, lean over backward. Right. So the government doesn't want that. That would be like blackmail. That would be like you coercing the government. So the government wants this to be done on its own terms, if it's even disposed to doing it at all. So if you're saying, for example, this is theoretical, that look, if you release Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, all of this mayhem in the southeast will end. Government may not want to buy into that.
Do you think, but that seems to look like a political agreement.
You see, that's the issue. The question is, who are those even pushing that in the first instance? Are they faceless? Do they have their identities? I'll give you an example. So most times when you read up some article or some public statements from the proscribed IPOB, you see Emmanuel Powerful or Emma Powerful. The question is, who is Emma Powerful? In what capacity is he even talking? On what grounds should the government engage such a personality or entity? So these are questions, these are concerns. But there are those who strongly believe that if the Southeast can speak with one voice, if they can be united and be consistent and be strategic, there's a pretty good chance this case will end with a political solution. But again, I've spoken to people of TV, and they say that look, the government cannot trust Nnamdi Kanu. That's the reason. That's a very difficult conversation to have. That they don't know what a situation where the man is given another chance, and then he jumps off and things spiral out of control. It becomes living a bad place for a worse place and things like that. But I don't think we should even be focused on Nnamdi Kanu right now. I think it should be such that politicians in the Southeast must now realize that there's a clear-cut difference between winning an election and providing leadership for your people.
Winning an election and providing leadership. Well, let's go on a very quick break, and then when we return back, we'll be having our other conversation that centers around President Bola Tinubu orders Wike to halt Fubaras's impeachment, instructs governor to recognize Wike as undisputed political leader in Rivers State. So we'll be having that conversation quickly after this break. Many thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Discourse here on Global Television. I am Samuel Odi, having an interesting conversation with a senior colleague of mine, Mr. Uyi Agbomofuebe, and we were having a conversation around the sit-at-home policy, how it has hampered and, dampened the economy of Anambra State for over the years and what it's doing, and if the step that is being taken by Governor Soludo is actually pointing towards the right direction. And then we're about to switch it up and then have a conversation also about something happening in the states very close to Anambra State. That's talking about River State, where impeachment conversation has been ongoing, and President has finally stepped in to have a conversation and to try to make peace between the two actors in this specific matter. Earlier on, when there was unrest in River State, political unrest, the president stepped in and also called for a state of emergency and called for a sole administrator to manage the affairs of the state for the period of 6 months when Governor Similari Fubara was suspended. Afterwards, after 6 months, Governor Similari Fubara came back after we saw what seemed to be a little bit of peace that broke out between the current FCT minister, who was the former governor of River State, Nyesom Wike, and his successor, Similari Fubara, when they met Mr. President at the villa, and then it looked as if there was peace for about two weeks or less, and then afterwards all hell almost broke loose, and impeachment conversations started coming from the State House of Assembly, and Fubara from his own end standing and then going to court to get an injunction to stop the impeachment move. Now, the impeachment is not just for him, but also for his deputy, with allegations coming from the legislative saying that he misused public funds, misappropriation of funds, and so many other allegations that were placed on the governor. But still, he's still fighting. And again, at some point, we saw the governor decamping, talking about Similari Fubara now, decamping from PDP to All Progressive Party based on what he said he left because of the lack of peace that PDP has, and then he is moving to a party where there is a bit of stability. When that happened, we thought the issue between him and Nyesom Wike, the FCT minister, would be water under the bridge, but it seemed not to be so because of the current happenings that keep reoccurring in the state from the legislative and also on the ground things also going on in the state. But quickly, let me bring you up to speed with what happened and why the president had to step in. Tinubu broke peace in the River State, orders Wike to halt Fubara's instruct governor to recognize the FCT minister as undisputed political leader in River State. President Bola Tinubu has again intervened to halt escalating feud between River State Governor Similari Fubara and his predecessor and estranged godfather Nyesom Wike. The peace deal came after months of failed settlements that had pushed the states to the brink of governorship, impeachment, legislative paralysis, and prolonged instability. The president had previously intervened in the rift between Fubara and Wike in December 2023 when he broke a fragile peace which took down sooner after leading the declaration of a 6-month emergency rule in the state under March 18, 2025 by Tinubu and suspension of the governor. However, in the fresh push to defuse one of the country's most controversial political disagreements in recent times, Tinubu ordered an immediate suspension of any impeachment moves against Fubara, but with very strict conditions. Tinubu's intervention came with a blunt message to Fubara. Wike remains the undisputed leader of the party, whether APC or People's Democratic Party, PDP, in River State, and he must be respected in that regard. Tinubu also said to have clearly told Wike to back off any impeachment plot against Fubara and allow governance in the state. Fubara and his predecessor Wike have had a cat and mouse relationship just within months of governors swearing into office in May 2023. What is now out in the open is that Wike, who personally engineered Fubara's emergence as successor, has sought to control the levelers of power from Abuja, while the governor has restated what many sees as the FCT minister's chokehold on him. The relationship began to fracture within months of Fubara's inauguration as the governor quietly started to assert his independence, with political actors in the state immediately taking side. Notably, in the ongoing fight, almost all the state lawmakers aligned with Wike. Substantially, attempts to impeach Fubara emerged from the pro-Wike group in the House of Assembly. Although the governor has tried to wriggle out of the situation several times, the shadows of impeachment continue to haunt him every time there is a disagreement with him and the minister. So looking at this now, this has been, you know, a situation that has been ongoing for years now, and I would say this has been the most embattled governor that we've seen in recent times, because we are seeing others, you know, Ododo of Kogi State and Yaya Bello having a very good relationship, like a father-son relationship, we're saying, despite, you know, allegations from the EFCC of misappropriation of funds of around 80 billion by Yaya Bello during his time as governor. But we're seeing them, you know, playing together, having fun, going to watch basketball games during the Christmas period where Dam Foundation had his championship, and then we saw them together having fun and watching the game. But now, what do you think is the problem in River State? Is River State so blessed that Wike can't take his eyes off the ball and allow Governor Similari Fubara to, you know, run the state as he seems fit?
You know, the way politics is played is such that you have some sort of godfather system, right? In the US, they say it's the establishment. In Nigeria, we say godfather. Wike, apparently, I mean, like it or not, is the de facto godfather of Rivers politics today. And who knows, maybe that is the thinking or the idea that Fubara is trying to alter, and it's becoming more of a Herculean task for him right now. How did this come about? Wike had been the governor the entire time, right from 2015. At the point Fubara was appointed as his accountant general, a man we understand had been a civil servant until that time. I've spoken to very senior members of the party, especially from River State, and they told me that this man didn't even have, I mean, talking about the governor now, yes, Governor Fubara, didn't even have a PDP membership card until 2022. In other words, until just barely, I mean, about 3 years ago, or less than 4 years ago, he was not even a member of the party. In other words, he became a member of the party just months before he won the governorship. All right, which in the space of politics in Nigeria is a miracle, right? And they say we should attribute the possibility of that miracle to Nyesom Wike, who today is the minister of the FCT. Now, Nyesom Wike has granted multiple interviews. On multiple of the occasions. He has also said that he doesn't like ungrateful people, that Governor Fubara has been ungrateful, that he can't take his structures from him. And that raises the question of what exactly constitutes a structure for politicians. They say it's the people that they've raised, those they've groomed, those who are loyal to them, their base, their supporters, of course the resources they have, and all of those machineries they put in place and what have you. So he had even told Fubara one time, if you can't stick with the terms of our agreement, you have to resign and leave the government house. But Nigerians have been asking, especially people of River State, what exactly are the terms of the agreements? In whose interest was that agreement reached? Was it just between you and the governor, or was it between you and the people of the state, or was it between the three of you? I mean, the governor, yourself, and the people of the state. So both the governor and Mr. Nyesom Wike have not been able to provide answers to those questions. But as it is today, it's a case of when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. The people of Rivers have had to deal with a situation where there was either no governance or there was poor governance. I mean, you can recall, Sam, how that at a point when, I mean, following the declaration of state of emergency, Ubas was brought in as state administrator. All right, he did that for 6 months, and we're told that he saved several billions. By the time he left office, we understand the state had 600 billion, which is well over $500 billion in its coffers. Even Wike himself had said not too long ago, at the twilight of last year, that politicians are skimming around that money. Whether he's part of those politicians or not, we don't know. But again, like you asked, is it because, I mean, what's happening? Is it because there's oil in the state? Is it because of the natural resources? Is it because of the money or the enormity of funding? It is everything. River State is one of Nigeria's richest states. So the idea is, if you become the governor of the state, or at least if you, I mean, depending on your proximity to power, you are also as powerful as the state almost. So for a man like Nyesom Wike, the last thing he wants, even in his dream, is to have a Fubara, his own protege, a man that he groomed, a man to whom he handed over power, a man he believes he brought from a place, a part of the state where high-ranking politicians like himself, influential, powerful figures like himself, were not in a hurry to go pick their successor from, and things like that. So he feels, I've done Governor Fubara so much of favor, I've done the Ijaw nation so much of favor, and you can't pay me back by being disloyal. The question is, how does Mr. Wike define disloyalty? What are the acts by the governor that have now amounted to disloyalty? We must ask those questions. But again, I think there's so much Nyesom Wike is not saying. There's probably much more that the governor himself is not saying. But all of this fight, we know, is never in the interest of the people.
Well, looking at that angle now, is the fight, obviously, from the way it's looking at the people of River State are, suffering, and governance, like you mentioned, either they get proper governance or they get below standard, and a whole lot of things that were promised by Similari Fubara.
Right.
He's fighting them hard to, fulfill his manifesto to the people because of obvious reasons. But aside from that now, what is your take to the fact that Similari Fubara defected to the APC? Do you think it's for a covering or getting a proper support from the president, or you think he did that because he wants to have an ultimatum to go for a second tenure? And mind you, remember, we saw him tilting towards a CPC earlier last year during the local government and councillorship elections, where we saw almost the entire local government areas and won those councillorship seats. CPC won those councillorship seats until the court stepped in, and then the whole election were turned over.
The polls were dissolved.
Dissolved, and then we saw the power now handed, moving towards APC. So do you think him joining the All Progressive Parties, because we're seeing a lot of defection from state governors, do you think this is to get a solid ground to run for the second term and also having an edge over his godfather?
I mean, without a doubt, Sam, what Governor Fubara has done is one for political preservation and, of course, for electoral guarantees. What we're hearing, we cannot independently verify this because we were not privy to those conversations, that were we part of the meetings. But we're hearing that, look, part of the terms, associated with the agreement that the truce that the president brokered was to say that Governor Similari Fubara will not stand for re-election in 2027. We don't know how true that is, but like you also insinuated, the man ran, if you like, he sort of got a step ahead of his ex-wife godfather by the campaign. I'm very sure that the former governor, Nyesom Wike, never saw that coming. He never thought Governor Fubara would defect, but he did. And that, for many people, has given him some sort of edge politically, because they say, yes, Wike may be a beloved of the president, but he's not a member of the APC. And as it stands today, we understand the APC generally, whether they come out to say it or not, is throwing its weight behind Governor Fubara. Because whether you like, for whatever it's worth, is their own now, officially. But Wike is a leader of the PDP, so anything can happen tomorrow. So we are sure of this one because it's with us now. We have one in the bag, but we are not so sure of you. And that's why when they issue the tussle, the argument about who is the political leader of River State came up, most of the senior members of the APC said the Governor Fubara is the leader of the party in the states. So at the end of the day, what that means is that Governor Fubara has, taken one step ahead of Wike. And from the way it's going, there's a pretty good chance he will stand for re-election. But again, I think what the president is trying to do is to not rock the boat, is to play it safe. Because the president is politically savvy enough to know that he will need these two gentlemen going forward. But if situations escalate beyond what we know today, the president may as well have to choose one between both of them. But I don't have the authority to sit here and tell you who he'll choose.
Yeah. Looking at let's look at their their political history together, right? Like you mentioned, until 2022, Siminalayi Fubara
was a political appointee.
Yes, was a political appointee. He hasn't.
Having been a civil servant the entire time.
Yes, and he hasn't played politics from grassroots at the level which Nyesom Wike has played politics. And again, River State generally has been a PDP state for over a decade, right? It's just now that we're seeing this change when...
it's been a PDP state since 1999.
Yes.
Over 2 decades.
Over 2 decades. So looking at it from those angles, do you think, and with the fact that Wike hasn't officially decamped from the PDP, despite the fact that there are certificates and letters saying that he has been suspended and chased away from the PDP, and he also making comments of having to run a convention come March 23rd this year. We are still going to have that conversation, hopefully. But looking at it now, looking at the state itself, generally PDP, do you think that the people of PDP will tilt towards Siminalayi Fubara, who doesn't have as vast experience in politics as Nyesom Wike? And do you think, despite being in the APC, do you think the local government chairman would be able to deliver their words at their communities to the sitting governor?
You see, that's going to be quite a challenge because whether you like it or not, with due respect to the governor in his office, he's a neophyte when it comes to politicking, at least in the Nigerian sense, right? But you see, there's something called sympathy vote, and I'll give you a quick example, real time. In 2016, Obaseki became governor of Edo State. Of course, he was going to succeed his own political godfather at the time, Adams Ali Oshomole. Of course, by 2020, his first term had cycled out, so he was going to stand for re-election in 2020. There was a challenge. What was the challenge? The APC would end up not handing him the tickets, and he already saw the handwriting on the wall. And for that reason, the PDP too got smart in the states. They had to keep pushing their own convention, their own primaries, because they knew if the APC ended up not giving Obaseki their governorship ticket, it was likely going to come into their fold. So they waited until that actually happened and he came to join them. Now, what's the thing? Obaseki won by a landslide in 2020. Not because he was loved by the people. The people were, so to speak, punishing Oshomole, all right, for becoming overbearing. Because from the analysis, you were the one that brought Obaseki in 2016. And you told us he was the best candidate, he was the best product in the market, in the manner of speaking, and as such, we should cast our vote for him. And we did. All right? By 2020, you came back and said you made a mistake. I mean, this was a man you called in 2016 the brain box of your campaign, the brain box of your government, your economic policies and reforms and what have you. So how in barely 4 years, the man had flips and all of that. So the people said, just so we can teach you a lesson and remind you that you are not more of an doorman than we are, you're not more of a stakeholder than we are. They gave massive electoral support to Obaseki at that time, and he won by a landslide. So I'm saying that to say, is it not possible that such a scenario can also play out in the case of Rivers in favor of Governor Siminalayi Fubara? And you know what, with the South people, especially when you start from a state like Rivers, is that they play politics with a lot of conviction. So if their sympathy tilts or swings in favor of Fubara, it means Wike's influence may not count for much. But again, what Fubara must realize that he shouldn't bank on sentiments, emotions, biases, and sympathies. He should rather get strategic, be dispassionate where necessary, and ensure that he's up against a very formidable force in the person of Nyesom Wike. And as it stands right now, trust is missing between both gentlemen. All right, I'm not so sure Wike trusts Fubara, just the same way I can't tell you authoritatively that Fubara trusts Wike. So everybody is living in suspicion. Everybody is suspicious of the other person. So going into 2027, Fubara is going to is going to do everything possible to put his best foot forward. And Wike is going to also try as much as he can to undermine Fubara, because he has made clear that you can't stand for re-election. So first, if you decide to go ahead and stand for re-election, that's already recalcitrance on your part. And then for you to now think you can win it will be a slight on my person. Therefore, Wike believes he has as much work to do to prevent that from happening as Fubara does to ensure that he wins, carries the day, and ends up as one of those two former governors who are now, some of the former governors who are now boasting of having done 2 terms in office. Yes.
Okay, this is very interesting, but we are looking at it from lots of angles now, and delivering the states now for the governor is one thing, and then also delivering the states for the president is another different thing. Like you mentioned earlier, that the president would definitely have use for these two gentlemen, and both of them, time and again, have come out to make it clear that they are supporting the president. Right. So looking at this now, APC one hand, PDP the other hand, which is still a controversial statement still for the FCT minister. Currently, he said, we'll see at the polls. That was what he made mention of. That means they would make some corrections, because he came out to apologize to the people of River State that he made a mistake. But this mistake now, is it the fact that the agreements they had is not something that is working out, or he genuinely made a mistake in terms of capacity, in terms of policies, in terms of initiative? Well, that will be a question I'll ask the minister when I see him one-on-one. But in a larger piece now, what can be done to, reverse all of this crisis going on in River State? Because the people of River State are literally, being the one bearing the brunt of all of these political sagas going on.
Talking about making mistakes, Shomole played that card since 2020.
Yes.
He came back to Edo people and he told them that, look, he made a mistake with the Obaseki and all of that. The question they asked him was, who did you consult? Who did you confer with before you made that decision to present him or advance him in 2016? So you can't come to us now and tell us, we don't even know the yardstick or the criteria by which you chose him. All right. So if you're coming back to say you made a mistake, what exactly are the indicators that you didn't hit the mark, that you did actually make a mistake? If you narrow that down to Wiki, for example, like you also mentioned, is it like you made a mistake not knowing that the man didn't have the capacity to serve the people, or you made a mistake now realizing that the man won't be loyal, has not been loyal to you? Is that the mistake you've made? You see, as for President Bola Tinubu, yes, he will need both of them. But if the circumstances, because politics again is about interest, it's about optics, and it's about realities. If the president now realizes that, well, it is only one of these men that will help me achieve my goal, I do not necessarily need both of them, he would eradicate, get rid of one, in a manner of speaking, cut off from one, right? That will happen naturally. But ultimately, the president's concern is not so much about party affiliation, APC, PDP, Labour, what have you.
I think
the president just wants to win the states. Yes,
he just wants to win the states.
He wants to win the states. He wants to win the states, and also of importance, obviously, the president wants the River State to be an APC state. That's very important, because it has never been that. At least let's also put that on record. I think that matters for the president, all right? But you must also now ask yourself, these again are basically hypothetical. What happens if Fubara were to stand for re-election in 2027 and he loses? There's that. In any case, what's the chance that he will be given the ticket? Let's assume he will be given the ticket, because who knows, maybe the leadership of the APC would speak to other aspirants to say, please, you guys have to throw your weight behind the incumbent governor. That can happen. But if that happens and the president himself signs off on it, what message does this send to Wike? Because Wike does not want the man to stand for re-election. Would that not pit Wike against the president? Is it possible that the president and Mr. Wike have reached an agreement to say Governor Fubara cannot stand for re-election in River State? There's that. Then is it also possible that if Wike continues to push this frontier of, I must prove a point to the governor, I must remind the governor that I'm the leader in the state, will he not also now be railing against the president shortly? Would the president take that lightly? Would the president also be concerned that if this man had his way, he could also run me over politically and things like that? So there's a bit of suspicion. There's enough suspicion to go around right now. And trust me, if there's anybody not taking chances or leaving anything to chance right now, it is President Bola Tinubu.
Okay, because obviously he's very ambitious, and he's very certain that he wants to go and run again for the second tenure. Well, let's talk about Wike now shortly, though we've seen him say that he's throwing his weight behind President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And he hasn't made comments if he would be running for any office, right? From that standpoint now, he made mention yesterday that he would be having, the PDP will be having a convention on the 23rd of this month, and I saw the caretaker of his led faction of the PDP. I was here this morning, and you had a conversation with him. So, looking at it, could you just brief us of what to expect now within those aspects?
Okay, here's the thing. The Wike-led faction has never been more optimistic. They've never been more upbeat about their role and, if you like, their influence in the party, because they now believe that they hold the aces, as we say. So the Turaki-led faction, where you have Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi and Governor Sheyi Makinde of Oyo, including Governor Amadou Fintri of Adamawa State, they all have to be at their beck and call. In other words, the Wike-led faction should be calling the shots right now. That's what they believe, and that's why they've been able to schedule all these events. Because, well, the convention that was held 15th and 16th last year in Oyo State, in Oyo State capital, has now been annulled by a court. And by doing that, the court also says that INEC did not observe. Yes, or monitor that event or exercise, and as such, it is null, void, and of no consequence whatsoever. Yes. So they are now saying that the recognized critical committee is that of the Wike-led faction. So that's why the Wike-led faction now believes that the PDP belongs to them. But the question is, what exactly, like we also asked the guests this morning, is the PDP bringing to 2027? Is it just to have the name? Do you still have the clout? Are you still the PDP today as you were 10, 15 years ago? If you cannot answer those questions, then that means the PDP is going to come limping into the election.
Okay, you know, like you mentioned now, they really need to sell themselves to Nigerians properly, because, you know, Nigerians are getting smarter, getting wiser, and would not, you know, stay on the same story that they've always heard. To do that and to turn that around now, there are two different fractions. That means it shows that, you know, there's no peace within the party. Do you think that Nigeria can, by any chance, throw their weight behind any you know, aspirant in Rivers from the PDP as it stands now?
That's quite an apt question to ask, given where we are today with the PDP. And you know, there's so much of emotion that goes with politics, right? So there are those who have loved the PDP right from day one, just because of what the party stands for and whatever that is anyway. But now that you now have a depletion, you now have, I mean, the party has been, if you like, not calibrated, the word I'm looking for is to say the party has been balkanized, all right? So you have this faction, you have that faction. So for the average person who is actually non-partisan, who just likes or loves the PDP, the question they might be asking themselves is, the reason I supported the PDP in 2015, in 2011, and 2007, all right, still valid today? Does it still stand valid and noble today? If the answer is no, then there's a pretty good chance they will not throw their weight behind the PDP. And there are people who are not particularly happy with Years on Wike, because they feel it's too braggadocious, he has too much of this personality, yes, that is bullish in nature, and they're not comfortable with that. That in itself can shape how people see the PDP today. And that thinking, you have no idea how much it can influence whether or not they're going to throw their weight behind the party in 2027.
Okay, well, we'll just see how all of this, you know, panel, is this an interesting conversation we're having, but for the peace now to be in Rivers State, do you think this step now that has been taken by President Bola Tinubu would put a bit of calm within the legislative to, you know, take their foot off the pedal in terms of chasing for this impeachment for Siminalayi Fubara and his deputy?
You know, what I've come to find, Sam, over time, I mean, the last 2+ years, is that most politicians in this country, beyond party affiliation, you know, respect the president. Not just because he's the president, they respect his politics. Yes, they trust his judgment. And they also know that even though they may differ politically, they can take his word to the bank. Therefore, if a President Tinubu gives an order, let's not call it an order, let's say he directs or he advises the Rivers State House of Assembly to say, look, you have to step down get off your high horses, all right? You have to put this whole impeachment process on hold. I can almost tell you with a huge sense of certainty that they will do exactly that. But here's the thing. It also now indicts Years on Wike, because the president says that you should halt the impeachment process. You are not an elected member of Rivers State House of Assembly. How is it that you are the one the president is appealing to? So you are the hand behind the shadow. You are obviously the one influencing whatever proceedings that we have seen being pushed by the Rivers State House of Assembly. You see, that again doesn't tell well of our politics. How that one man can be in Abuja and be calling the shots over activities and governance in faraway River State.
Well, that is appalling, actually, to even have a conversation about. But this is how much time is permitting us to take on today's edition of this conversation. I want to say a very big thank you to you, Mr. Uyi, for joining us on today's edition of Discourse. And this is how much time will permit us to take, and then we are hoping to see that those practical steps, the president stepping into the situation in River State, and also the governor of Anambra State, Governor Soludo, putting his foot down to ask individuals not to observe sit at home on Mondays because of the fact that, they are trying to abolish that and also bring a level of stability in the state's economy. We will see how all of this pans out in the nearest future. And this is me saying bye for now. See you again as we discuss further.